All right, everybody, we're back for the brand new episode of KPS Stories podcast. Have a very special show lined up for you all tonight. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your co-host, Kayla.
We're here to talk about extraterrestrials. That's right, aliens.
Woo! Little different from the paranormal stuff, but, well, I guess that's subjective, isn't it?
It's paranormal
Yeah.
enough. It's not ghosts, but it's spooky.
I guess so.
It might or might not be real. That's paranormal, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's a big topic. It's tough to pick a place to start, but I'll just go ahead with the good old CarbondAlien, which is one of the local stories that has circulated since the 70s, where basically what happened was in our very own Carbondale, Pennsylvania, it said a strange craft crashed into a pond, and people could see this craft with lights and stuff at the bottom of this little pond. But before anybody could investigate, the government mysteriously showed up with flatbed trucks and dredged this pond and took this mysterious object away, never to be seen again.
So for any of you listeners that are local, it was Russell Park up in Carbondale, behind the baseball field, and it does empty into a large area of woods. So it wasn't like a little nice isolated pond. It was park, pond, endless woods for a while. I believe there was also a report I saw somewhere that said a witness went up to a cop and asked what was going on, and the cop told them that some kids taped a bunch of flashlights to a trash can lid and threw it in the water. So obviously if that's what happened, they would not need flatbed trucks there.
Yeah, the one I had heard was that someone threw a lantern into a pond, and that's why the CIA got involved.
Yeah,
So what's interesting in cases like this, even if the story itself seems unrealistic, like, was there an alien spacecraft? I don't know. But when the government comes out with these really ridiculous and obviously even faker sounding explanations, that's what makes people question. There's a very famous one where someone claimed that their home was under siege by aliens in Kentucky some years ago, where the family was hanging out on the porch on a hot summer night when these glowing creatures approached their house, and they basically fought them off with shotguns and all this kind of stuff. And they called in the police, they called in the sheriff, all that stuff. The boys came out to investigate, and they didn't find anything, but they saw a bunch of bullet holes in the wall, and they saw pieces of wood on the trees and stuff that had a strange glow to them. And the official explanation was that these were owls. There were great horned owls that were sitting in the branches that these people mistook for aliens and shot at them all night. That's harder to accept than just saying there were aliens that were at this house. And so with a trash can lid with a bunch of flashlights, that's just, come on.
yeah.
So, interestingly, I don't know when exactly it happened, but we had talked about the Carbondale white Bigfoot once before. There's a lot of times a connection made between those kinds of creatures and extraterrestrials. Like, people will see Bigfoot, and then they'll see lights in the sky somewhere nearby. And there's all sorts of goofy stuff about that online. About how, like, Sasquatch is from another dimension and all this kind of stuff. It raises interesting questions, I guess. But perhaps none is more interesting or more perplexing than the alien abduction phenomenon, which, depending on which sources you read, is either laughably fake or terrifying. There was a movie that came out a couple years ago called The Fourth Kind. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I have not.
It's basically set up to be like a found footage movie. And it says at the beginning that it's real footage of a psychologist who lives in Nome, Alaska. And she's interviewing people that have these terrifying encounters where it's late at night and they're laying in bed and they see an owl at their windowsill. And then they wake up the next morning with like bruises and cuts on them and stuff like that. And when she tries to use hypnotic regression on them, they start like freaking out. The one dude, like, he like picks up the chair and he's like trying to hit her with it, and these goons run in and like carry him off. It was supposed to be based on a true story, which is kind of where this movie came into controversy. Because, of course, what happens is that these people got abducted by aliens. And the link is made between the gray alien, that classic skinny alien guy with a long face and giant eyes. The link is drawn between those creatures and barn owls that the people reported seeing right before they blacked out during this abduction encounter. And what happens at the end of the movie, without spoiling it too much, is that we meet the aliens. I don't think that's a surprise. And it was controversial because of a few things. The first was that they made a whole website of it, and they were treating it like it was based on true events, when it was all just completely made up. And the second thing is that Nome, Alaska has a legacy, a bad reputation of people disappearing. And they kind of capitalized on that and said it was aliens that were making these people disappear. And the citizens of Nome sued them for defamation. It was a whole thing. You get a couple of other famous abduction cases that turned into movies. That's kind of why they're famous. There's an interesting one, this movie called Fire in the Sky. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I have not. Not really into aliens.
Yeah, I'm not either. They kind of freak me out.
Fair.
Like, I could watch demon movies all day, that's whatever, but I don't want to watch an alien movie.
I just think a lot of the sci-fi stuff really, like, makes it look sci-fi rather than, like, what realistically could be out there.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Because our aliens are probably not just humanoid-looking things.
No, it's probably just anything that's defined as living.
Yeah. And whenever we talk about alien life, we always seem to think, like, life can only exist within these certain parameters that we have on Earth. So you need water, you need oxygen, you need all this kind of stuff, but we really have no idea. And what I find very interesting about the alien experiences is just how they always look like us. And it just begs the question, is that what they look like, or is that just what we think they should look like when we make up stories like this?
Definitely the latter on that one.
And it's kind of haunting when you put it this way. Why is it that all of the gods in ancient religions are humanoid? Are we made in their image, or are they made in our image?
We're the ones creating it, so they're made in our image.
And that's something you got to think about with these alien stories. So anyway, Fire in the Sky, the Travis Walton one, he was basically a logger just out in California, something like that. And him and the boys are out drinking one night, something like that. And an alien spacecraft approaches, and he gets abducted. Now, his friends were very scared to talk about this to anyone because their foreman, their boss, just disappeared one night. And they thought if they went to the cops and said, hey, our guy is missing, the cops would say, well, you guys probably just killed him. So they didn't say anything until years later. But Walton recounted a story of being taken aboard this spacecraft and being tested and actually being healed by these aliens because he had suffered some kind of serious injury. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was something like he was in a car accident or he got injured when they were logging. He suffered a very serious, life-threatening injury. And he said that when he was on board this craft, the aliens did everything they could to heal him, and they were actually very kind and very generous to him. And that's something that's completely absent in the movie, where they're monsters that are, like, trying to, like, cut film out of his eyeball and take sperm samples and things like that. So that was a pretty famous one that had a decently successful movie. You also have the original alien abduction story, the Betty and Barney Hill case, where they were a couple driving down the highway going home, and it was like 2 a.m, something like that. And all of a sudden they looked at the clock and it was 5 a.m, and they couldn't figure out what happened to all those hours. They were only a couple miles down the road from where they had been, and they didn't have any recollection of those missing couple of hours. Where were they? What were they doing? And it wasn't until later on that hypnotic regression comes into this, which, if any psychologists are listening, everybody has their opinion on hypnotic regression and whether it's valid or whether it's just the therapist telling the person what they remember. I tend to lean toward that with most of these stories. Well, Betty Hill starts having terrible nightmares where she's seeing these strange beings and she's seeing herself being violated and all this kind of stuff. So she goes to her psychiatrist and her psychologist, and they're talking more about it, and they're starting to think, what if it goes back to what happened that night when you guys were driving home? So the therapist says to Betty, let's do regression. Let's see what's hidden in your memories. And only then did she recount a terrifying encounter with alien life forms, where her and her husband were taken onto this craft and submitted to a medical exam and all this kind of stuff. And what was interesting about this is that there is actually a little bit of evidence that comes with it, which is incredibly rare in any kind of alien-related story. It's almost like when we talk about other cryptids, how the evidence mysteriously disappears before it can be examined. With aliens, it usually just doesn't exist in the first place. She had a map where she said when she was on board the spacecraft, one of the aliens told her which solar system they had come from. And it was one of the constellations, the Pleiades, yeah. This is from the Pleiades system. And the aliens had shown Betty a star map aboard the ship of all the different planets and stuff that they came from and, how far away it is, all that kind of stuff. And when she was under regression, she was able to redraw this map. And what was so interesting about this is that this happened in the late 60s, if I remember. And it wasn't until 1991 or something like that we had the technology to actually see the Pleiades system, and it was exactly what she had drawn all those years before. So where did she get that information? So that's kind of an interesting one with that. And you have some other alien abductions that, after you hear enough of these stories, they all really kind of follow the same pattern.
So why don't you tell us about your beliefs on aliens?
Sure. What I think with aliens is that there's definitely other life forms in the universe. It would be very silly to say that there's not. To say that the human being is the apex of creation or anything like that, I think that's blissful ignorance. As far as aliens visiting the Earth, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. The prospect of it is terrifying, but I've seen strange flying objects in my life that could have literally been anything. I don't know if it was aliens. But if alien intelligences are visiting the Earth, they have to have some purpose for doing so. And our minds go to, they must be evil, they must have negative things in mind. But we don't really know. There's the whole series Ancient Aliens, which is basically the idea that aliens built civilization, which I find extremely hard to believe. But you hear other stories where they come out of the ship, they take some soil samples, they pick some leaves off the trees, and then they go back and leave. It's kind of like what we're trying to do with Mars, and what I think we would do with other planets if we had the technology. Maybe they're just curious in what's here. They want to know more. And then you get into other things like time travel, and are the Greys us from the future?
Maybe everybody's just reflecting on how they think we would be if we found a foreign species on another planet.
I think so. Because let's think about it. Look at the way that we treat other humans. What would we do if we stumbled upon another race on another planet?
Yeah, probably exactly what we're doing now.
Yeah, it would probably be very violent and very destructive. So when we have the slightest hint of a species coming to check us out, we just assume they're doing the same thing. But we don't really know that. Unless you believe the people that say they talk to the aliens. But maybe that's a whole other kind of thing.
I don't really think that's paranormal as much as that's psychological.
Yeah.
Again, subjective.
Yes. Now, as far as we got to address this one, like the government working with aliens seems pretty unlikely to me.
I feel like they're hiding a lot at the whole Area 51 thing.
Yeah, and I remember a couple years ago there was a plan to storm Area 51, and it was met by a wave of enthusiasm. I remember my students in class on the day of the event were like, oh, like we don't want to learn about how to structure paragraphs anymore. Can you show us the live stream of people attacking Area 51? So I turned it on, and it was just like 50 or 100 people like standing out in the desert, like dicking around, not really doing anything. And I left it on for an hour and a half on mute while I was lecturing. And in the whole time, nothing happened. You know, the secrets of Area 51 weren't revealed. And I think to myself, if I were a top secret government agency, I would tell people all this shit I have at Area 51 to draw their attention there, while all of my stuff is actually somewhere far removed that no one actually knows about.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, it wouldn't be all so well known if there's actually top secret stuff there.
No, and we see how the internet and social media suppress the things that they don't want to be out there. If the government was actually hiding that base from us, we wouldn't know anything about it. Did they, like, have alien bodies in a bunker underground somewhere?
Oh, I'd assume, yeah, everything's alive.
It wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me one bit. And, I mean, you get in all kind of conspiracies of, like, how the alien crash at Roswell is where we got touchscreen technology. So, like, the smartphone that you're playing on right now was taken off an alien spaceship kind of deal. I don't know about that. But I do know that if a species were to come here from another world, that would be a vastly superior technology to what we are aware of having now. Are governments hiding technology from the public? Absolutely. It wouldn't surprise me if we have some kind of high-tech vehicle. But
even with in the philosophy class that Steve was just teaching and I was in, he was showing us the videos of that robot, Sophia. I don't even think that is the highest form of robot they've created. They've 100% created an entirely mobile thinking robot, and they're just showing us that to make us think that their technology isn't developed.
Yeah. I read somewhere one time that the technology that you have in the public now, the government had 20 to 30 years ago, and it's just now becoming commercially available. That's something to think about, I guess.
Yeah.
As far as seeing lights in the sky and stuff like that.
We've also got to think about what about all the men who played with cars growing up and now can create all sorts of mechanical objects in their basements and garages.
Yeah, somebody somewhere must have come up with something a little bit beyond what they're showing us.
Yeah, and why would they not create some sort of, like, flying frisbee? Anybody can have a drone. Anybody can do anything like that. Careful what you're thinking when you see a UFO.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, years ago, drones were not really widely available. Like, I remember the first time I saw one a couple years ago, my gut reaction was to run in and get the gun and shoot it. I didn't know what the hell it was.
Yeah, now we've got one in the closet in the room 2 feet away from us.
Yeah, now they're all over. And, like, we're sitting there one night and we just see lights and it's buzzing and all this. And I said to my dad, like, what is that? And he goes, I don't know. It's like, do you want me to get the gun? And he's like, I don't know. And by the time I got the gun, it was already gone. And it was just some kid goofing around with the drone. that was forbidden technology 15 years ago.
Moving fast.
Moving too fast.
We could get into anything about the metaverse and all sorts of AI, but is there anything else you want to talk about aliens?
Not specifically.
All right, then if you guys have had any alien stories, specifically here in NEPA, like, go listen to that part about the CarbondAlien again, because if you were in Carbondale in, what was it, the 70s or the 90s?
I think it was the 70s.
The 70s. If you were in Carbondale in the 70s and you saw that happen and you have more information, let us know. If you have any information about aliens you've seen around here or any stories you want to share with us, or if you want to come on the podcast and share them, let us know. Comment below or message the KPS Facebook pages.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We're looking for your stories, because I have lots of paranormal knowledge, but I'm running out of content at some point. I need your stories on this show.
So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you probably in 2 weeks, because Keystone has Advising Day next Tuesday. So we will see you then.
Thanks, everybody. Have a safe night.